Hello and thank you for joining today's event. Introducing SICSS-Howard Mathematica event sponsor, Akira Bell. Now I would like to introduce Nanette Coleman. Nanette H. Coleman is a PhD candidate in the Sociology Department at the University of California, Berkeley and UC National Lab Los Alamos Fellow. Her work sits at the intersection of the sociology of culture and organizations and focuses on cybersecurity, surveillance, and privacy in the U.S. context. Specifically, Nanette's research examines how organizations assess risk, make decisions, and respond to data breaches and organizational compliance with state, federal, and international privacy laws. Nanette holds a Master of Public Administration with a specialization in democracy, politics, and institutions from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and both an MA in Economics and a BA in Communication from the University at Buffalo SUNY. A non-traditional student, Nanette's prior professional experience includes local, state, and federal service, as well as work for 2 international organizations and 2 universities. Nanette is also the lead organizer for SICSS-Howard Mathematica.
Thank you all for joining us for this discussion with Akira Bell. I'll begin by introducing Akira. After that, we'll discuss Akira's professional and academic trajectory to date. From there, we'll spend some time learning about her work, including what it's like being a senior vice president and chief information officer at Mathematica. Finally, we'll conclude by discussing her path to her current position. If you've seen other discussions on this channel, including 6 at H5, Past, Present, and Future, and Bit by Bit with Matt Salganik, you know that I'm particularly interested in elevating discussions on the topic of diversity in computational social science. Today's discussion will reflect that as well. Akira Bell is Mathematica's Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer. She oversees technology infrastructure and governance and leads strategy for delivering innovation in support of client and internal business function needs. Before joining Mathematica in 2018, Bell led the IT function for Aramark's higher education business unit. Previously, she served as a divisional chief information officer within the Hess Corporation and held various program management, application development, and technology consulting roles with United Health, IBM Global Services, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. While at Hess, she guided IT strategy during the acquisition of its retail division by Marathon Speedway and was part of a team recognized by CIO Magazine with CIO 100 Award for delivering innovative IT solutions during Hurricane Sandy recovery. Bell earned a BSc in Operations Research from Princeton University, where she also serves as an alumni mentor for women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Welcome, Akira.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us today and an honor to have you representing one of our 2 founding organization sponsors for SICSS-Howard Mathematica.
Yes.
So before we jump into our discussion about your professional trajectory and just you, I'd love to start with the origin story of SICSS-Howard Mathematica. So origin stories matter quite a bit. So can you tell us how this amazing event that will kick off this summer 2021 came to be?
Sure, I'd be happy to share the story with you. It's a story that has lots of steps and lots of connections that just worked out along the way. It started with Matt joining our board at Mathematica. He was a great add in that he brought more of that computational and technology lens to the research work that we do. And you see that in the Bit by Bit book, and even this program, the SICSS Institute program. And a nice partnership and friendship, I think, grew between him and our CEO, Paul. And at some point, he introduced Paul to the SICSS Institute and asked, would Mathematica be interested in hosting one of the summer institutes? And at which point, I think Paul talked to me about exploring the idea with Matt. So I gave Matt a call. He told me a lot more about the program, and I understood what it meant. And he mentioned that he would ideally love to see a program hosted in Washington, D.C., as that was an underserved area that SICSS hadn't reached to yet. And honestly, immediately once he said Washington, D.C., I thought of Howard University. And I said to Matt, what do you think about hosting this with an HBCU? And he said he didn't have a contact there, but he said if they're willing and they're interested, then let's do it. I immediately thought of Howard University because of connections that I already had with the university. I had friends who were on the board, and I had served on a panel with President Frederick on the digital divide a few years previous. And I knew there was an interest on his side in terms of equity in some of the sciences. So I reached out to my friends who were on the board, who immediately got the SICSS information over to President Frederick. And I immediately got a note back saying, we're interested. And that's when I met Calvin, who you know already. And Calvin and I started talking about this opportunity and found there to be a really nice alignment between the two organizations, between both the missions of both of our two organizations and where we see an opportunity to really invest in the pipeline of this type of a resource reaching a historically Black set of graduate students. So with both organizations kind of being solidly behind this HBCU vision, that's where we got started.
And for those of you who are new to the channel, please check out the video with Calvin Hadley, which has also been posted on our site. So let's learn a little bit about you, Akira, and about Mathematica. So for some people, Mathematica will be a very familiar name, its work and reputation, but perhaps for others who are seeing this video for the first time, they might be new to Mathematica. So can you tell us a bit about what Mathematica does and what you do at Mathematica?
Sure. So Mathematica, we have several business units where we offer a variety of services, whether that be in policy research, program assessment, data analytics, and insights. Overall, I think of us as a company that's about finding insights from data, whether that's in a policy, a program, a foundation, with people who are offering grants out to grantees for foundations. That's what we do. We collect data, we analyze data, we understand what implications it has to a policy or a program or an agency, and we provide the insights needed to optimize.
And can you tell us a little bit about your work as CIO?
Yes. What I do as a CIO is a lot of the traditional behind the scenes work that not a lot of people are interested in terms of making sure that the company has a solid infrastructure, great security, and applications to run our back offices. But I'm also responsible for working on the technologies that service our clients. So we have a project right now that's going on that we're just launching that we call Data SICSS, which stands for Data Science, Data Engineering, Analytics married with social science. So this is how we're thinking about bringing more advanced technological products and services into our traditional body of social science work.
So my next question was going to be what projects in your pipeline right now that you're very excited about, but it sounds like that's an exciting one right there.
That's the one that we're most excited about right now. Yes.
So you mentioned earlier about the I hate using the word synergy, but the synergy between Howard and also Mathematica. So can you talk about a bit about what excites you about SICSS and the partnership with Howard and where you see this currently and where it might grow?
Yeah, I think where I'm really excited about this is one, I think I'm always interested in initiatives that are about growing a new pipeline, right? So this is an area, computational social science is an area that marries two really important, bodies of work, our traditional social science with computational science, right? So I may come from the computational science. So one of the areas that attracted me to Mathematica is the ability to use technology in these areas that are so impactful to the public, right? So now take an area that doesn't have a high representation of people of color as practitioners, that's working on research and developments that highly impact vulnerable communities, which includes communities of color. So it's so important that we are not just represented in the talent pools, but that we are also influencing the outcomes and the insights that go into those decision-making processes. So this feels like the gift that should keep giving. We get talent pools out there. It's a gift to those students, but those students then get to go proliferate those talents and impact communities even further. And that's the result that we're both interested in, both at Mathematica and at Howard.
Were there any programs or organizations that were for you what I think you and I expect that SICSS will be for so many students at HBCUs and writ large in the world who participate in SICSS this year? Were there organizations that are near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, there was a program that was near and dear to my heart that had a lot to do with me getting into science and technology, and that was a summer science program that Bell Laboratories used to host many years ago. And they hosted a program for underrepresented minorities, women, and students of color to come in and intern for a summer with some of their researchers. I had the opportunity to be in that program, and it changed my world. It changed what I thought was opportunities in terms of things that I could do, and I started to see myself in different career paths than I had before that moment. But it also gave me an infusion of experience and expertise that most of my peers didn't have. I was working along engineers and researchers. I'm going to age myself, working on the first fiber optic lines that went across the transatlantic. That was a big deal back then.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it personally.
that was what we now know as FiOS was started way back then. But it was just such an eye opener, and it gave me a cohort, not just it gave me mentors for sure. But it also gave me a cohort of people that I still communicate with. And I'd say out of any other program I've been with, the majority of us are still working in a STEM field.
Wow, that's huge accomplishment for the program, and I'm excited to hear the stories that come out of SICSS-Howard Mathematica. I think we both see the great potential here. So can you, I think you touched on this, but can you talk a little bit about how SICSS-Howard Mathematica fits into the larger work and values of Mathematica?
Yeah, so our mission is about driving our services towards public well-being. And we see justice and equity as a significant portion of our mission. And at any strategy meeting, you can guarantee that equity issues are going to come up. Again, because we know that a lot of our work is impacting vulnerable communities, and it's very important that those impacts are done in a way that upholds our values of equity, integrity, and non-biased decision making. So this particular program that we have shaped with Howard falls right in line with our own internal ethics and values at Mathematica.
So let's talk a little bit about your path to your position as CIO. So can you talk about, what you studied in college, how you knew you wanted to do this kind of work? I imagine that when you were a little Akira, that you weren't, walking, I'm going to be a CIO one day. So, how did you get here for those who are very outside of this world right now and trying to find their way in? How did you get here?
Oh, wow. My story of how I got here has to start with I had two parents who very much nurtured me being a computer geek. My father was a computer geek. My mom worked in telecom. She was the one who first found that Bell Labs opportunity for me and surrounded me with all these Black scientists. But I was an engineer, and I was in operations research, which is a department that most people have never heard of. But in layman's terms, it was a lot of mathematical modeling and data science type of work applied to engineering problems. I actually used my thesis to apply that same mathematical models to economics issues, is what I did my thesis on. I did a pricing type of a thesis, but I also had a programming component. I had to do some programming to automatically analyze a whole lot of numbers and crunch numbers. And one of the things that I just learned is that I had a good talent at computer science and programming, and that I could use that to increase scale and quality and intelligence for certain systems and processes. So coming out of undergraduate school, well, first of all, the time I graduated in undergraduate school, it was the 90s. And if you could spell IT, you could get an IT job because Y2K was coming.
Okay.
And everything was going to shut down. I like to think that I was more talented than spelling IT. But it was a really great time to get into technology. And I started out with PricewaterhouseCoopers, which you mentioned, which gave me just a tremendous trajectory at learning business problems and how technology could be used to improve business problems. And that's pretty much where my career went for a number of years. Working predominantly in consumer products and retail areas. I did a small stint in pharmacy and healthcare. But for the most part, I was helping companies use technology to either improve back office functions or help with consumer facing systems and processes. When I got the call from Mathematica, though, it was a very different opportunity. It wasn't even comparable to what I was doing in terms of the type of industry. But I really loved the opportunity to still be applying great technology to a new problem set that was just so much more meaningful than driving revenue and shareholder value. This was really about creating something that had real impact in an area that I felt this was so much more important.
Can you tell me a little bit about when the social sciences and humanities became important to you? I know you and I have talked about some groundbreaking courses that you took at Princeton and professors, because this work, of course, marries both sides of the aisle. So can you talk to us about that?
Sure, a little bit. I had the engineering degree, but I also did what Princeton calls a certificate, which other schools would call a minor. I had a certificate in African American Studies. So I had great professors in the African American Studies Department: Nell Painter, Cornel West, Toni Morrison, plus just a good liberal arts degree. My mother was a sociologist by trade also.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
I love your mother.
Yeah. So, and I think I just had a family that was steeped in the value of doing meaningful work, whether that was inside of your 9 to 5 or outside of your 9 to 5. So there was always that interest there underlying. But until I came to Mathematica, it was almost two separate worlds. I had this 9 to 5 job where I was helping very large companies get more efficient with technology. And I had this outside interest where I was looking at how do we get more educational resources to Black and Brown communities and things of that nature. And the two just never married. They just lived separately until I came here. And I had the opportunity to say, how can we use technology for education and healthcare equity and all of those fun things?
And I imagine when you were getting started, you probably couldn't have imagined a job like this.
I did not think it existed. I did not think it existed.
And here we are. I've heard it say sometimes the jobs that we dream of now just don't exist yet. You have to wait for the world to catch up. So
Yeah.
can you offer some advice to others considering a position like yours? Like what are what a mentor of mine calls green shoots? So the little flowers just poking their heads up from the soil that people who are just jumping into the field might want to invest their time or energy in. Or what's advice you wish you'd gotten?
Advice that I wish I had gotten. Oh boy. Don't be afraid of laterals.
Mm.
Is one piece of advice. Laterals can be a gift. I'd say the other thing that I'd say that I have done that I would offer as career advice is don't be afraid to eliminate your own job. I guarantee if you have the capability to eliminate your own job, your company will see value in it and you'll get offered something else.
Wow.
I have attempted to leave 2 occasions by eliminating my own job. And they were like, hey, if you can do that, come on over. We got a new job for you. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. Let me go do that. So I've had 2 occasions where I'd say if you have the wherewithal to kind of optimize what you've been doing so that other people that you've nurtured can carry it on without you, one, again, always invest in creating other pipelines. Your narrative has to go from me to they. It has to as a future leader. It can't be about what I've created. It has to be what they can do. But if you can do that, it's a transferable skill. You can do it in other places.
I'm glad you broke that down because in my head I was imagining, since you're an engineer, that you'd created Akira robots and there were you were leaving behind robots behind you in
That
all
would
these
be
other
good.
jobs. That you're
No.
still working at Hess, you're still at PricewaterhouseCoopers. They don't realize you've left yet. There's an Akira robot behind you.
No, not at all. It's more that one, it's the technologist, and it's also a little bit of the consulting mindset because I grew up in consulting. Is you got to leave your clients, and they have to be in a sustainable mindset when you leave.
Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We look forward to seeing an application from you for SICSS-Howard Mathematica, either for this summer or for a future summer. Take a look at our resource slide, which is posted right now, and check out our website. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and send us an email if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your time, and see you for another one of these videos soon.